limit breakers. In One Punch Man, there's only one man who has achieved such a thing, and one man who came close. I'm talking, of course, about Saitama and Garou. Saitama removed his limiter entirely while Garou cracked the barrier of his own, only to fall short in the end due to the process of monsterization and all which came after. However, while Garou did not succeed, if you had to predict which One Punch Man character could be capable of breaking their limiter under the assumption that the story would allow it, who would it be and why? That's what we're here to find out. But briefly, what is a limiter in One Punch Man and what does it mean to break it? So, a limiter is essentially a biological ceiling of power within every living thing. It blocks the endless evolution of progression, meaning someone or something can only become so powerful before their cap has been reached. As Genus noted, he calls this growth restriction a limiter. It's different for everyone, which is why some characters are stronger than others despite their varied experiences. And processes such as monsterization or experimentation may heighten that ceiling up to a certain degree or perhaps bolster them closer to their initial limiter, yet even those do not break the limiter itself, only change its positioning and even ruin the process of breaking it entirely. Breaking it requires tremendous physical and mental fortitude, however. You don't just break it by becoming super powerful, since characters like Blast and Tatsumaki haven't done so despite being stronger than the majority of the cast. This is further shown by how Garou was stated to be in the process of breaking his limiter while still being weaker than numerous characters. To break one's limiter is a body and mind breaking experience uniquely tailored to the dimensions of one's personal limiter. What this means is you don't need to become as strong as Blast to start cracking your limiter, since as powerful as he is, he hasn't done it either. But Garou was seemingly on the cusp of it, so this concept isn't locked behind some kind of strength paywall. To understand how one can break their own limiter, we can look at Saitama's success and Garou's closeness to doing the same. In a nutshell, to avoid this video becoming too deep in the trenches of the limiter, a character most likely to break their limiter needs to undergo numerous high stakes battles where they experience survival in near-death circumstances which test their very mortality, and all within an almost constant period of time. Saitama achieved this during his training days where he fought tooth and nail each and every day against monsters who were all capable of killing him, and almost did in many instances. Saitama himself attributes his strength to the training program, but the reality of it was the combined strain and trauma his body went through day in and day out from the excessive training without recovery, mixed with the life or death battles which saw him pushed to the limit on a regular basis, are what eventually removed his limiter entirely. Garou had a similar experience where he was fighting numerous heroes while being pushed to his limits over a short span of time, which then turned to several near fatal battles against monsters, only to then evolve further into do or die battles against heroes again. This similar pattern, which is akin to a revolving door of deathly circumstances without a meaningful rest period while still somehow surviving, is what creates the opportunity for a limiter to begin experiencing the stages of breaking. However, Garou's internal motivations soon saw his efforts tainted as monsterization interrupted the process, then further interrupted by a god's influence sometime later. Instead of Garou's limiter breaking like Saitama's, it seemed to have adapted to match the new monster powers. This indicates that motivations and mentality can be a natural barrier to limiter breaking via steering it off course towards monsterization territory or similar, as Saitama had no evil or antagonistic motives. He just passionately pursued his hero hobby during this limit breaking process, while Garou was waging an internal war from within as he sought to become the ultimate evil, which evidently appeared to derail his limit breaking opportunity toward the end. So let's take a look at those who may narratively get closest to replicating the right conditions. My first possible option is none other than Metal Bat. When you look at the nature of his abilities, it's almost scary how his ability to withstand, overcome, and become empowered through damage is so similar to the adaptation Garou showed throughout his own storyline. We've all grown so accustomed to calling what Metal Bat does fighting spirit that it's almost easy to forget how strongly it resembles the pattern of breaking a limiter. The more damage he takes, the stronger he somehow becomes, even when it shouldn't make sense. This mimics the experiences of both Saitama and Garou during their path to limit stressing, indicating that there might be more than meets the eye to Metal Bat's own limits. In fact, while it's hyperbole, it's even more interesting given that the databook says is Metal Bat's power can increase to infinity, which is not a term used for any other character outside of Saitama, as far as I can remember, suggesting that whatever fuels Metal Bat's power boosts can theoretically have no limit if he were to find a way to overcome his ultimately human limitations. Again though, it's not that I think he actually can reach infinite power, since it's more of a hype statement, but it is interesting to see the concept affiliated with him. However, a big difference seems to be that Metal Bat doesn't retain the heightened levels of power he gains through his fighting spirit once it calms down, or it at least seems that way, since he shouldn't now be on a baseline level capable of hurting something like Sage Centipede. Saitama only ever went up and up throughout his limit and negating process, whereas Metal Bat goes up and then down, waiting to go up again once another stressful battle comes along days or weeks later. Regardless, it can't be denied that of all the heroes, no one mimics as closely to Saitama's near-death loop better than Metal Bat. He enters into battle, takes constant damage, survives his wounds, and rises in power, bolstering to newer and stronger heights during a do-or-die fight, then repeats the process for as many monsters remain. Because Metal Bat isn't a martial arts practitioner, he's constantly having his limiter stressed by the waves of damage he takes in every tough battle, since he's not evasive like Flash or technical like Bang, but more to his own style. Metal Bat further stresses his limiter by brute forcing through the situation instead of going down until he can strike that monster out of the park. Metal Bat enters a cycle of limiter stressing activity in every single tough fight he enters, enabled by his reckless approach and fierce tenacity. And while it's hyperbole, the ceiling to his strength the more pumped up he gets is apparently unending, with the main problem being he just can't get there because, as seen with Sage Centipede, his body eventually can no longer cash the check his fighting spirit is writing past a certain stage, albeit a very impressive stage since Sage is one of the strongest monsters in the series. What holds Metal Bat back though is a few things. Of course, the consciousness factor as I just mentioned, but also opportunity and ambition. Metal Bat never wants to lose and will always fight to protect. Okay, great, but he's not actively running around looking for the hardest fights possible like Saitama was. Metal Bat's fighting spirit will eventually always either hit the wall or fade out, because once the threat is gone, he goes back to hanging out with his sister, looking after his cat, or whatever else. For us to truly know if Metal Bat can break his limiter, he needs to run the gauntlet like Saitama or Garou did. Just constant searches for tough battles over and over. If he goes down, get back up as soon as possible. Continue the cycle more and more until eventually we find out just how far this fighting spirit goes. However, he's not aware of this possibility, so he's not engaging in this search of do or die dailies, nor does he have a reason to when the Hero Association lets him know when it's time to batter up. So he's not going to go rushing around looking for monsters to fight like some C-class hero on a quota. So while Metal Bat's fighting spirit greatly resembles the cycle needed to break a limiter, he misses the consistency and situation to currently do so, nor does he have any idea that breaking a limiter is even a thing, so it's not his fault either. If such an event were to happen, which spurred on these missing factors though, it's very interesting to ponder if Metal Bat may be the next character who could begin breaking his limiter, since everything else about him lines up so well. And while Metal Bat is someone who is within this video due to the nature of his character, Zombie Man is within this video due to the nature of his current position in the storyline. In chapter 88, Dr. Genus revealed to Zombie Man the concept of the limiter, making him aware of such a phenomenon and how it theoretically functions. After, he informed him that a hero has accomplished this and went bald as a result. From this point, Zombie Man had become one of the very few characters aware of such information. Nearly 100 chapters later, in chapter 175, Zombie Man returned to Dr. Genus after having realized Saitama could be the man who removed his limiter due to him being the one who defeated Garou according to Genos' retelling of events. What we next find out is that Zombie Man requested Dr. Genus to try and remove his limiter so that he too could achieve this level of impossible power. This makes Zombie Man the single known character to the audience of One Punch Man who is now completely aware of what a limiter is and is actively trying to remove it. All of the characters who have nearly removed their limiter or could be capable of it do not know of this specific concept, which is a massive deal since that will likely stop them from ever doing so. Naturally, I would have imagined Zombie Man's power of regeneration might provide some kind of barrier to breaking a limiter since he just heals over over and over again, which must negate some level of limited testing survival conditions. However, the fact that they've chosen him to be a part of this off-branching storyline should indicate that might not be the case. What One and Murata decide to do with Zombie Man and Dr. Genius's attempt to remove the limiter is beyond what we can say should or shouldn't be possible, so it may end up being a way for them to show that even science can't figure out how to remove a limiter without replicating the method the audience knows. Or they may have chosen those two very specifically since these are the characters they have in mind to overcome the limiter's nature by combining Genius's intelligence with Zombie Man's resolve. From what I gather, Dr. Genius is going to put Zombie Man through the ringer with all kinds of torturous high intensity testing to see if they can uncover the truth to removing a person's limiter. Again, I'm not sure how much Zombie Man's immortality will play a positive or negative part in this, although eventually we should find out what they learn from their attempts and how far they get into achieving their goal. It's even possible that maybe they don't break the limiter, but Zombie Man gets significantly more powerful despite the failure. Either way, this plot path has not been included within the story for zero reason, so you have to assume something of some significance will come from this, which makes Zombie Man one of the possible characters who could be next in line to break their limiter since he has a direct story connection to it. Putty Putty Prisoner is surprisingly another character who has some odd signs of truly testing their limiter. Unlike someone like Flashy Flash or Bang who either dodge or parry the majority of attacks which may harm them, Prisoner takes them all head on like Metal Bat does, meaning his fighting style leads into him risking his physical health in nearly every fight he has, which is a big deal for stressing the limiter. Because Prisoner is constantly tanking hits while fighting to the death against powerful enemies, we've actually seen him adapt and evolve mid-fight, like when he learned the ability to use vibrations inside his body to his benefit with Vibration Angel, and then again when he literally started growing dense, protective body hair against Nian in response to being slashed. No matter which way you look at it, this is not normal, even among S-class heroes. It's like Prisoner has a weaker but kinkier version of Garou's adaptability, which we all know was instrumental in getting him close to breaking that limiter. But here's one thing though, I'm not going to analyze this too much, because hear me now, there is no way on God's green earth that Putty Putty Prisoner is going to be given the story exploding honor of being the next person to remove their limiter. This character is simply not going to be given that role. So this wacky adaptation he has through cycles of tanking lots of damage in tough fights, that's as far as it's gonna go, especially since he's resting up in prison between these situations. So there should be no narrative means for him to keep this evolution consistent too. Still, a funny thought. Imagine it is Prisoner, and then we have to spend the next 5 years seeing videos and online discussions of Putty Putty Prisoner versus Goku, Putty Putty Prisoner versus Superman. I think that'd break my brain. A quick shout out to Genos in this conversation. It's funny because Genos actually seems to follow a lot of the same combat cycles which could lead him to potentially breaking his limiter, going by how often he fights and how often he loses in the most nearly fatal of ways just to get right back in there the very next day. However, since he's a cyborg who is constantly undergoing new models and upgrades, the limiter doesn't really factor into it much, and so if we use the logic we know about how the limiter should work, then being primarily cyborg will likely stop him from ever being able to achieve this, even if he were a good candidate for it. However, like I said, it's One and Murata's story, so who is to say what is truly impossible given the nature of something like a limiter? Ever since I saw Gon use Nen in Hunter x Hunter to turn into an adult years ago, I don't know what to expect from anime and manga power systems anymore, okay? But before we finish, there is one more character to mention, and the interesting thing about him isn't that he might be the next person to break their limiter, it's that he might be a person who already has. You guessed it, Watchdog Man. But what makes many of us think that Watchdog Man is one of the strongest characters in One Punch Man? And what makes many of us think that he might even secretly be a character who has removed their limiter like Saitama and is right there in plain sight for us all to see? For that, you'll have to watch my video on Watchdog Man, which should have popped up on your screen by now. So go on, throw a dog a bone and check it out. Thanks for watching, like and leave a comment on your thoughts, and I'll see you soon.